Good afternoon, everyone. I just want to say on behalf of the family, on behalf of Westridge, we are really glad that you've come to celebrate the life of Ben with us today. I kind of feel like I should point out for all of those who have the incredible Cubs gear. It's not Cubby blue, but my suit is blue. I am a fan. And I'd also just like to point out that Ben had some very distinct loves, and he always brought a great kind of creativity and artistry to whatever he did, wherever he was around. And one of the things that you'll notice on the table here on the stage, there's a portrait there that has been done by one of the people that work at Paramount, and it's going to be hanging in Paramount, I think, at some point. And the urn that is there beside it, I think Ben would approve of. There's something artistic and creative about that is unique, and I'm sure that he would have loved. I also would like to say, just on behalf of Westridge, I remember when the Olsons first started coming here to Westridge, and they sat kind of in the same row that kind of filled up the whole pew. It became known as Prophet's Row because all those prophetic names of all those boys. And we were always happy to see them and still love them, and are so glad that they're a part of Westridge. So our condolences to you and our sympathies. As we've gathered for this time, we're coming expecting encouragement from each other and from God Himself, because that's what God designed with the community of family and the community of His body, the church, that we would come together in moments like this and encourage and help one another. The Apostle Paul wrote a very candid letter to a church that he had started. And in this church, there were some people who had become very disillusioned with their faith. And Paul is writing to sort of encourage them. And one of the reasons they had become disillusioned was because some of the friends and family that they had known who had passed on before them, they were concerned about those people and what's next for those who passed on and for those still remaining. And here's what Paul says. If you were reading in this letter from him, from 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, here's what he says. And now, dear brothers and sisters, we want you to know what will happen to the believers who have died, so you will not grieve like people who have no hope. For since we believe that Jesus died and was raised to life again, we also believe that when Jesus returns, God will bring back with Him the believers who have died. We tell you this directly from the Lord. We who are still living when the Lord returns will not meet Him ahead of those who have died. For the Lord Himself will come down from heaven with a commanding shout, and with the voice of an archangel, and with the trumpet call of God. First, the believers who have died will rise from their graves. Then, together with them, we who are still alive and remain on the earth will be caught up in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. Then we will be with the Lord forever. Paul wraps this up by saying, so encourage one another with these words. We're not pretending as we've come here today that there's not going to be any grieving or there's no grief as we celebrate Ben's life. But the truth is, the grieving that we feel, the grieving that we have is much different, because we have a hope that others don't have, those who are not believers. Our separation is temporary, and there's a reunion day that is coming. In our time together, we plan to do just what Paul said. We're going to encourage one another. There are going to be friends and family members who are going to come and share words and tributes and music with us to encourage us along the way. I'm going to pray as we begin, and then we'll begin with Kayla's brother Cole, who's going to start. Some of the family is going to share some words with us. So let's pray together as we begin. God, we come because we know that you are the only one who can truly give us the peace and the comfort that we most want. Father, we know that you are not just the designer of our lives, but that you, day by day, protect us and provide for us. We're grateful that, Father, even in the most difficult of times, you are there, that you provide what we cannot provide for ourselves. Father, we're grateful that you allow us to gather and to encourage one another, and we are so grateful that we get to celebrate the life that has been so well lived. Father, we ask and pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Hello everyone, my name is Cole. This poem is called Remember Me by Margaret Mead, in dedication to Ben. To the living, I am gone. To the sorrowful, I will never return. To the angry, I was cheated. But to the happy, I am at peace. And to the faithful, I have never left. I cannot speak, but I can listen. I cannot be seen, but I can be heard. So as you stand upon a shore, gazing at a beautiful sea, as you look upon a flower and admire its simplicity, remember me. Remember me in your heart, your thoughts, and your memories of the times that we've loved, the times we've cried, the times we've fought, and the times we have laughed. For if you always think of me, I will never be gone. Thank you.
Hello. I'm Kayla. And I first of all just wanted to say thank you so much for being here. It means a lot to me and to Ben and to our entire family. We had a rule in our home that whoever cooked, the other one would do the dishes. So Ben often cooked. And I often did the dishes. And while I did the dishes, he would always be in the other room, of course. And he would play songs that he knew I liked to sing along to. I miss that. So bear with me. I just wanted to sing for him one more time. They say people come, they say people go.
Good afternoon, everyone. May 2021, I woke up to a voicemail from my grandma. Her voice sounded different, discordant, and rushed. Moments later, a message came across my phone screen, and I learned of the shocking news. Our dad had died overnight. More messages and phone calls came as more family members heard the news. I was tasked with informing our mother that the father of her children had just died. I walked into my mom's bedroom. She would be leaving for a vacation in just a few hours, and I had to wake her and tell her the terrible news. Our father died young, only 63 years old. He had a stroke weeks prior. While we all knew his life would be greatly altered going forward, it still came swiftly, with no warning. This was the second death in our family in just a few short years. December 5th, 2022, I was at work on a fairly normal day joking with a coworker. A call rang on my phone. It was my Aunt Corinne. At first thought was that Ben was getting suddenly discharged from the hospital and needed a ride home. This was not the news I received. I couldn't tell you how much time passed as I found myself sitting on the floor against a wall. Everything in the world stopped. Ben isn't going to make it. I ran out of the building as fast as I could. I drove as fast as I could, getting from Algonquin to Elgin in just 8 minutes, a drive that normally takes 25. I pulled up to my mom's house, frantically struggling to unlock the door, and made my way to her bedroom. Like a cruel deja vu, I once again have to give my mother terrible news. But how? Losing our father was hard enough. How do I tell my mother that her oldest son has days, maybe hours, left to live? She woke up fearing something had happened to her parents, not even fathoming what I was about to tell her. Few words were spoken as we made our way up the elevator at the hospital. The long, curved hallway leading to Ben's room was sparsely populated by nurses and doctors. As we approached the end of that long hallway, my family was standing in the hall. No smiles, no jokes, little eye contact. A melancholy atmosphere was around all of them. After a brief greeting and checking in on Ben, most of the brothers just sat in the hallway, staring out a window at the same nothingness. When the brothers are together, we joke around, give each other brotherly, sarcastic insults, and we catch up. The environment was uncomfortable because we all sat in silence. It was out of character for all of us, but we didn't need to speak. Their presence comforted me. Knowing they were there, dealing with this shared reality was enough, and with all of us together, what's next? We meander the halls aimlessly, essentially just waiting. The entire outside world continues, but we're oblivious to it. For hours and hours, pacing up and down this long, curved hallway. December 6th, 2022, I pulled up in the driveway of my grandparents' house late at night. My mom was sitting in the passenger seat. Zach walked with me into the house. Weak in the knees, I made my way up the stairs and into the living room. Grandma and Grandpa were sitting watching TV. Before I could speak, tears poured down my face. Ben had just passed, moments before. The words stumbled out of my mouth. It doesn't feel that long ago. I stood on the stage with my brothers, with Corinne, performing Danny Boy for our late grandpa. It was the only time I ever performed with any of them. I recently watched the video of his service, but quickly had to stop. The first two people to speak at Grandpa's service were Ben and Dad. Now they too are gone. Grandpa was the first death close to me that I ever experienced. It would have a profound impact on my view of life and death, and a drastic change in emotions. Dad's death was gut-wrenching, having just visited him a few days before at a skilled nursing facility. He died a mile from my house, yet I felt like he was a million miles away. I struggled to believe it was actually him, convincing myself they must have confused people. Ben's death, I have yet to process. Just days before, Ben was thanking me for being a part of his crew, the people who he could rely on. There's moments I feel joy and happiness as I hear a song that reminds me of him, but more often I fail to understand why any of this happened. First our dad, now my brother. Ben wasn't even 40, so why him? Every time my phone rings, every time I walk into my mother's bedroom or up the stairs with my grandparents, or even think about Central DuPage Hospital, I'm overcome with anguish. I flash back to those moments that I know will affect me forever, some in ways I haven't even experienced yet. I've lost so many friends and family in the last few years, each time thinking that's gotta be it. There can't be more after this one, yet here we are today. Ben was 16 when I was born. I can only imagine what he was thinking when Mom and Dad broke the news that after 3.5 years, number 7 was on the way. Ben's unforgettable teenage years were filled with a bunch of screaming kids and sharing a bedroom with a toddler. I am honestly surprised he went to college so close to home. Despite changing thousands of dirty diapers, never having a quiet moment, living in complete embarrassment and mayhem for many years, and often sitting on the sides of his younger brothers to get the attention, Ben adored his family. He never failed to show it, whether we were at Margaret and Jim's acting out skits or wandering around Chicago, or even as he opened his home to way more people than a fire marshal could deem realistically safe. Ben's love was always on display. One of the most meaningful moments to me was when Ben announced he was leaving CYT to stand up for kids being left out in the LGBT community. Ben stopped directing. He stopped doing the thing he loved most, that he was incredibly talented at, that he left such an enormous impact at, because not everyone could be a part of it. I could never ask him to do such a thing, but he didn't need to be asked, because it was his natural instinct to do what was right. Ben's love and compassion pushed me forward so many more times than he probably realized. When I told him about Oscar, when he would ask about film projects I was working on, or congratulating me on my image award, sharing the excitement of getting into Columbia College, starting a new job, moving to Iowa, trying to buy a house. Even if it wasn't the best idea, or if it was destined to fail, Ben supported it every time. I think that is a reason so many of us brothers get along so well. It's because we share these similarities and interests. We felt the excitement our interests and hobbies give us, so my passions were his passions. Despite how horrible it was to watch Ben in the fight of his life, to see him struggle and feel defeated, I am so grateful that in the last months of his life, I grew a closer and stronger bond with him than ever before. I simply can't explain what that closeness felt like. I was by his side when he was officially diagnosed with lymphoma, singing Hamilton and other musicals on the way to countless doctor appointments, watching him during his chemo treatments and in his final few weeks, being his rock to lean on. I am so honored and thankful to have been a part of his crew. I will never understand how the best of us was taken so soon, why this was the outcome. I miss you, Ben, every minute of every day. Thank you for being such an incredible person, the best brother anyone could ask for. Thank you for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. I strive every day to mirror your conduct and your selflessness. I can only hope that when I leave this life, I've made even the smallest fraction of an impact that you have. As one of your saying for many years, always stay humble and kind. Thank you.
Ben, my firstborn boy. I was practically a kid myself when his father and I had him, living in an apartment newly married. He brought a joy to my life that I had never experienced, a joy that every one of my 7 boys brought me, but Ben was the first. Once he grew out of late night feedings and crying marathons, he was so sweet and loving, handing out hugs and kisses to all he knew, sometimes to those he didn't know. That also included his enormous collection of stuffed animals. His little bed was filled up with them, and he, the little boy who loved them, surrounded him while he slept. He had a little white polar bear that he aptly named Pole. That one was small enough to hold in his hands when he sucked his thumb. Then there was his Disney favorite, Fievel Mouskowitz from the American Tail movie, a film I practically memorized. He watched it so often. Then his night glowworm had to be nearby to protect him when he slept. Every stuffed animal had a name. Every stuffed animal had a story. He was given a Teddy Ruxpin one year for Christmas. It was a bear that read to him from a cassette inserted in his back, which he could follow along with from a book which taught him to read. This created a great storyteller in Ben, which paved the way for his career and one of his many talents. Like his siblings, Ben loved TV. He drew great inspiration from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. He was convinced that Mr. Rogers was explicitly talking to him. For those old enough to remember, Jem and the Holograms was very popular in the late 80s, and while Ben probably wouldn't admit to it, he really loved that show too. Ben had all the hallmarks for kindness, but this became solidified when he started attending school. Everyone was his friend. If any other kid in class was having a bad day or was sad or not feeling well, Ben would go over to them and try to cheer them up. Sometimes he would just sit silently with them. How could one regular kid have so much love to give? How lucky I was as a mother to have a son so genuine. A memory that is shared by my parents when Ben was little also showed his proclivity for humor. Granted, he wasn't trying to be funny at the time, which only etched it in my memory more. Ben was at my parents' house, and he was running up and down the hall with his toys. Suddenly, his toe became abruptly acquainted with the door frames. The sheer scream that came from his small boy alerted every dog in the neighborhood. With tears flowing from his eyes, his grandma said, as grandmas do, "Will a cookie make your toe feel better?" Through tears and sniffling, he said yes. So grandma gave him a cookie out of the cookie jar, which we all know can cure any childhood trauma. We expected him to jam it into his mouth and chomp away, forgetting of his recent abrupt contact with that door frame. Instead, he held the cookie against his toe. I guess he thought that the cookie could literally fix his hurt toe. But it stopped his crying, so perhaps cookies can fix anything. As he grew older, and my next son Zach was born, the two of them would build elaborate cities on their bedroom floor, composed of Matchbox cars, Legos, Lincoln Logs, Ghostbusters Play Center, and Little Tikes people. They would spend hours erecting their little city that I didn't have the heart to tell them to take down. So they tiptoed around their little metropolis and slept in between the buildings on their bedroom floor. As Ben grew older, his desire for adventures grew, just like it does for most kids. So he started learning how to ride a bike, into the neighbor's tree, up and down the block, the neighbor's driveway, the bushes, and down the street to the park. While he was a child with 2 left feet, remember the cookie story, he learned to ride quickly, and the neighbor's tree and bushes soon weren't collateral damage. It was summer in the 90s, so he and his brother spent much of their time outside. His pursuit to knowledge grew thanks to family trips to museums, air shows, and the planetarium. His grandparents fueled his desire to know more about the world around him. And as more of his brothers were born and more adventures were experienced, he never lost the kindness and caring he had when he was little, as he was always a fun helper and would get everyone excited for their experiences. With all of his brothers, he was always very involved in their lives, whether being in the shadows when Zach had a dance recital, or when more attention was given to the assembly line of younger brothers. I mentioned I have 7 children, right? But Ben would proudly speak of them and their accomplishments, always content when the spotlight wasn't always on him. Entered the teen years, and his dad and I had to go on a business trip. It would be just him and Zach in charge of the house for the week, spending the evenings visiting with the grandparents. We told him and Zach, jokingly, as neither kid was interested in parties, not to host any parties while we were gone. We came home a week later, and the house was intact. No phone calls from the neighbors or visits from the police. We knew our boys behaved. Now, as it turns out, Ben did host a party. Our sweet Benny rebelled and had a party in our house. Now, all kinds of debauchery could have taken place, and our imaginations only made it worse, but in true Ben form, he invited a couple of high school friends over, and they sat and listened to the entire Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. This is a 74-minute long song. I was almost disappointed. Ben chose to have a party when we explicitly told him not to, and it was a big snooze fest. Even Zach could barely contain his excitement over this forbidden party. And that was Ben. He never thought to do bad things or be hurtful. He just wanted to share his love for music, prop up his brothers, and be a selfless example toward others. He went on to play the saxophone and got quite good at it and garnered himself the nickname the Music Man. For anyone who knew him from the many musicals he directed, that was a very apropos name. Being the firstborn, I have so many more memories, 39 years worth. I am privileged to have watched him grow into the man we all knew. The same man the same man he was as a little boy. His foundation and self was always one of love and acceptance, and I genuinely cannot recall ever having to get angry at him. He was a wonderful person, a great brother, son, husband, and the very definition of kind-hearted. He lived a very full life for 39 years, and he impacted so many others along the way. He was a kid at heart, and that little boy that talked to teddy bears, comforted friends, and had Beethoven parties was still inside of that full-grown man. He was and always will be one of the greatest blessings, and I will absolutely and unequivocally miss him for the rest of my life.
Ben was one of my favorite directors to work with. I knew that he believed in me, and I knew that he wouldn't give up on me, and that he knew I was capable of more than I thought I was capable of. He truly believed in the students he worked with. He brought so much joy and humor into our shows. Even when the show got hard, he still had faith, and he still knew that we could push through and come out on the other end. He was encouraging and loving, and I'm so thankful that I got to do so many shows with him and get to know him so personally. And I'm very thankful for the impact that he had in my life.
I got to know Ben over the years, and he always made me laugh every time that we were around each other. And something really special that I loved about Ben, and I'll never forget, is when he would walk into a room with students, whether it be the audition room or after rehearsals had already started, and all the kids were so happy to be there and couldn't wait to start the run of the show, Ben would just light up the room. And the best part about that is he would make every person in that room, big or small, no matter what their role, no matter what part in the production they had, behind the scenes, on stage, parents, everyone, Ben Olson made them feel like the most wanted, wonderful, important, special person on this earth.
I met Ben and Kayla at Judson in the fall of 2003, which means that I've known them for almost 20 years. It's wild to think about. Actually, Ben was the first person that I met there. We connected over music, obviously. When I think back to those college days, I can't separate my memories of Ben and Kayla because they're one and the same. Kayla and I were music majors, and Ben was with us in choir. And we did, just a lot of life back then together. We went on countless choir tours all across the country and even overseas to Germany. And man, those were some of my fondest college memories. Driving around in the bus and staying at people's houses, singing together. Those were just great times. A few years after graduation, after, everyone had gone their separate ways and started their lives in different places, I got the privilege to work with Ben again on many, many musicals. It was a blast. We got to do one of the best jobs in the world. We were teaching music and inspiring young people, and Ben was really, really good at it. I always said that it didn't really matter to me what show we were going to work on. As long as I knew that Ben was going to be on the team, I was down to be on the team with him. We did Hairspray, Tall Tales, Wizard of Oz, and Charlie Brown. Those were just a couple of them that we did. And it was a really great honor to call Ben my friend and experience just those little pieces of life with him and with Kayla. I know Ben is rejoicing in glory, and I'll remember him fondly and hopefully tell great stories about him until we meet again.
Ben Olson was a member of the Judson College Symphonic Band. In fact, he was a founding member. I believe he started in 2003, and he also served as band president in 2005, 2006. Ben was a great supporter of the band program. He was always there. I don't remember that he missed any rehearsals at all, and was very enthusiastic, very helpful, and always prepared, always practiced his part, and was very encouraging. And even after he graduated with his bachelor's degree, he continued as a community member and supported the band in that way, and also recruited his brothers to play in the band. So he was one of my greatest helpers and greatest supporters. He will be missed.
So Ben and I, we went to Judson and sang together in choir. During this time, I had a quote book that I would take random quotes from people, and I was able to get a couple random quotes from Ben. And here are a few of them. He said, "I'm a female guy." The next one, I said I wanted to go to Hell, meaning Hell, Michigan. We were going on choir tour. And he said, "This is." And the last quote I have from him, he said, "I have nice armpits. I use special deodorant."
I knew Ben primarily from CYT and being on directing teams together. And the first time I met him, he was on my team as my assistant, and it was my first time as a lead director. And I'm certain, looking back, that he was put on my team mainly to affirm and encourage me, which he did so wonderfully. I mean, he just was so positive. He told me my ideas were great. He told me I could do it. He loved things that I thought, just everything in so many ways. He was just so positive and wonderful to work with, and really did just give me a big boost of confidence that I could do this time and I could do it again.
I met Ben 2 years ago when we were working together on Les Mis. This was our first show back from COVID. We were still dealing with mask restrictions and occupancy restrictions and social distancing guidelines. And Ben met my then 9-year-old son for the first time during one of our final Tech Week rehearsals. And my son had decided to play baseball that spring instead of doing a show. But when Ben met him, he only asked him about baseball. And his total focus was on that. He mentioned nothing about the show. He mentioned nothing about doing theater again in the future. His total focus was just on where my son was in that moment. And it was like he was the only person in the world and the only thing that mattered. And as a dad, I will never forget that.
Ben means so much to me. He is and continues to be one of the main reasons of why I am pursuing my dream. He has been a constant support system, and I feel like I was always so excited to see him direct or be a part of any projects, and specifically, I would always text him when I went to go see a show at the Paramount, because I was just letting him know that I was really excited, and that I was excited to see him too. And so it was just really cool to kind of have him there as sort of a comfort blanket in a lot of ways. He also, I did make his team. I know this is going so long, but I did make his team the first year I did improv, and he said I was so dang close. I was really young, and ever since then he told me, he was like, this does not mean that you're not good enough. You're just really young. I want you to continue pursuing comedy or improv and stuff like that. And to this day, I remember that, and it means a lot to me. It means a lot to me. Ben means a lot to me.
So you know the saying of finding like-minded people in your life? Ben for me was a like-hearted person. He normalized a lot of things for me, like being a huge nerd about theater and education, and about our kids that we got to teach, our faith, and our deconstruction of our faith. Unabashedly laughing so hard that it hurts, especially in very awkward and uncomfortable situations. To not take yourself so seriously and allow yourself to just be silly. To be deeply in awe of beautiful things. Also what it means to be an ally and to love with everything that you have. I'll be forever grateful that our paths not only intersected, but were also rerouted in the same direction.
When I think about memories of Ben, a lifetime's worth of memories come flooding in, but I'll just share a couple. The first memory has to do with Ben and his minivan. In high school, Ben was given the privilege of driving a minivan, which we were excited about because that means that we didn't have to ride the bus to school anymore. Well, I also, after turning 16, was given the privilege of driving my family minivan. So we each had one. So we got the idea one day after church to race our minivans down 7th Street. So there we were at a stoplight, anxiously waiting for the light to turn green, revving our little minivan engines, and very excited for the speed that we were about to experience. So the light turns green, we floor it, our little vans go from 0 to 45 in about 60 seconds, and we were having the time of our lives. This memory is one of my favorites because it speaks to Ben's willingness to be up for anything, to do anything, to have a smile on his face while doing it, and always wanting to have an experience that cultivates joy and excitement and enjoyment for others.
So what words come to mind when I think of Ben? It didn't take long. Care, commitment, energy, passion. I just think about the time I was fortunate to be able to spend with him working with youth group in St. Charles, and just the love and commitment and care he had for those kids, and then also seeing that with his brothers and being able to engage with them over those years, and then watching him kind of from afar working with youth theater for so long, and just all the love. It was evident that he had for his students, but also that they had for him. So definitely a fixture in a lot of people's lives, and someone who will be missed, but someone who I know is really being celebrated as well.
There are few people that I felt I could engage with in a conversation with so freely and easily and openly as I could with Ben. He was someone who would always make you laugh even when it was a difficult time. He would also help me elevate my thoughts and actions, and he made me a better person. He was a role model to me, and I'll always carry that with me.
What do we remember about Uncle Ben? What do we like about him?
He loved us, and he went to Cinderella with us. And he was funny, and he cared about us.
That's right. I loved his passion for everything he liked, like the Cubs and theater and you guys. He was like the best uncle. Do you agree?
Yes.
We're gonna miss you, Ben.
Bye.
I knew Ben from our time at Judson University, and we sang in choir together. And one of my favorite memories was just his love for Kayla. And that we were pretty young, you know. Now I realize, being a little older, just how young we were. But he just always knew that Kayla was his person, and he just never doubted that. And so we had a lot of conversations about her and just his love for her and waiting on her to get there and, know the same deep in her heart. And she did, of course. And at the end of the day, Ben's generosity and steadfastness and just compassion for people was always an example. There was never a step that was too far to take for someone else. For Ben, it was never an inconvenience. And I learned a lot from him as a young person. He was just enough older than me that I kind of looked up to him. And I'm just so happy he was a part of my life and in this world, because he made it a much, much better place.
One memory I have of Ben comes from a youth canoe trip that we took the kids on, and he was there, and we were back at the camp after canoeing all day, and so everybody was kind of getting changed and put dry clothes on, and we were gonna have chili mac for dinner. And Ben comes out of the tent wearing this bright white zip up track jacket, and it was so funny because we thought it's gonna get dirty for sure. But it was so Ben, because it was just, he was like, look at my new jacket and I love it, and he loved it and it looked great. But it was just a beautiful memory that I have of him just really being unapologetically him and showing up and being present as himself.
I first met Ben when my then 12-year-old daughter was auditioning for a show, and he was the director. He was new to this directing team, and my daughter was new to the county, just like him. Him and his directing team had chosen her for her first lead role. And as they say, the rest is history. That was the beginning of an amazing friendship that I truly cherished. Ben was very meaningful and purposeful with his words. He was kind, he was loving, he was Christ-like, and his words just meant the world to anyone who met him. Ben fought fiercely for what he believed in, even if it wasn't the most popular thing. He believed in those kids that didn't even believe in himself. He was your biggest cheerleader, encourager, and honestly, pretty darn funny. He was humble and loved by all who met him. And although his final curtain call has come much too soon, I will cherish the memories that we've created, and our life was better because he was in it.
What I loved about Ben, there's a lot of things, but Ben, so passionate about everything that he did, and he was always wanting to make sure that he was doing his best. He was teachable and just checking in all the time just to make sure that he was doing his best, because Ben loved every kid. And I can say that from I was there, I witnessed it. He loved every kid, and his desire was to see every kid shine and to give them the opportunity to do that. I miss Ben, and but I know I'll see him again.
I feel a lot of things when I think about the times that that we spent together, and I wish that all of them didn't involve me not feeling like myself. But I think I always knew that Ben saw me for who I was, and I hope that I can translate that care into the students that I teach in my current career as an educator. I think that as teachers, we take the lessons that we were taught by inspiring and compassionate and caring and kind people, and then we pass it forward. And so I hope that I get to pass some of the things that Ben had given me onto a new group of kids. So thank you, Ben.
I am Ben's younger brother, the second oldest of 7 boys. Since my inception, Ben has been a part of my life. When we were kids, every family gathering, vacation, and bus ride to school included both of us. We spent the weekends playing with Matchbox cars or G.I. Joes. We had expansive imaginations that made us kids playing seem like a production with an audience. We built massive cities with Legos and Lincoln Logs, like my mother mentioned, and just created our very own sprawling utopias. We were pioneers of our imaginative world. And as we grew older, no longer building Lego cities, we still shared the mutual similarities that brothers often have. We quote movies or television shows, shared a love for the arts, and rarely found ourselves bored when in each other's company. I respected him, I loved him, and I trusted him. And while thinking of Ben right now brings great dejection and sorrow, I do find comfort in everything that we shared. The profound respect that I have for him, and the unconditional love that we had for each other. I have so many memories I could share about Ben, enough to fill pages and pages. But I find myself at a loss for words trying to properly articulate how much Ben meant to me. Perhaps the words worthy enough just don't exist. So I'd like to share 2 memories that I have of Ben. And in the midst of great sadness, these 2 memories do always make me laugh because he had a fantastic sense of humor, albeit sometimes at his expense. The earliest memory I can recall in my life included Ben. I was sitting on the floor in the living room playing with some toys, and Ben was getting ready to go to school. He was in kindergarten or 1st grade, so I was about 3 or 4. I can still remember Mom was getting his backpack together while Dad was getting ready for work. Our dad would always open the bathroom door after he showered, and the steam would linger in the hallway, and the smell of Old Spice cologne waft in the air with the smell of coffee coalescing together. It was a smell that I missed because it meant that we were together in the family. Ben had announced his discontent with having to go to school, just as most kids do, because kids don't really like school. And during his protest, I continued to play with some of my toys. It was a Ghostbusters toy and some G.I. Joes. Now I know that Ghostbusters and G.I. Joes are not from the same franchise, but somebody had to hunt down these ghosts. You know what I'm saying? So, but while I was playing and listening to Ben on the cusp of writing to his congressman over the outrage of having to go to school, I thought to myself, man, I'm glad I don't have to go to school. This sounds terrible. So imagine my surprise when the next year I'm going to school. I'm the one now writing to my congressman. So while we were both avidly against going to school and getting forced education, we both eventually came to love learning as we got older. We may have had differences in what knowledge we were seeking, but our interests often overlapped. This constant desire to learn more cultivated long conversations of interest and fascination between us. These are conversations that I'll greatly miss. And another memory from when he and I were probably 10 and 12. Our dad had made sugar cookies for our mom and for himself. Something special just for the two of them. It was a weekend and they weren't home, so Ben and I were babysitting. And I decided to steal one of these plain sugar cookies. Ben walked in during the middle of my illicit crime. All right, I like the saying, the kid with his hand caught in the cookie jar, I was busted. And now I begged Ben not to tell on me. I pleaded my case. I swore I would do his laundry, give him my dessert, perform community service, just as long as he kept it a secret. And I was relieved when he said that he would, but with stipulations. I couldn't do anything that he didn't like, or else he would tell mom and dad. So from that time on, anytime I did something that Ben didn't like, he'd remind me of my salacious crime as the plain cookie caper. And now this extortion lasted for years, many, many years. In fact, into adulthood. It begs the question of what the statute of limitation is, I was wondering, so. Granted, into adulthood, it was simply just a joke at this point. And, as adults, anytime I would get sarcastic or tell a bad joke, he would say, hey, I'm going to tell Mom about those plain cookies. It was a scary thought. So in the interest of my beloved brother, keeping the greatest secret since the Watergate scandal, I would like to take this moment to take Ben off the hook. Mom, I stole your plain cookie 27 years ago, and I'm very sorry. But in addition to his deep personal convictions and his unabashed love towards others, his sense of humor is another example of just how exceptional he was. I'd like to finish this with something that I have thought a great deal about, especially as of late. Most of my family knows that I love science, whether it was my career in medicine, learning about our expansive universe, or how the world around us works. My sense of wonder and curiosity is never fulfilled. And something I learned recently was that the grief we feel when someone we love dies is our brain learning how to adapt. There are actual physiological changes within the neurons and composition which leave lasting effects. This same grief alters the muscles of our heart, causing the rhythm of our heartbeat to change. The production of red blood cells decreases, our immune system weakens, even our circadian rhythm and sleep cycle is altered. And all of this was learned thanks to the research performed by scientists and experts, all on their collective quest to understand more. However, in all their research dedicated to medicine and anthropology, love is one thing that cannot fully be scientifically explained. There is no agreeable hypothesis for love. And while chemicals like norepinephrine and dopamine trigger feelings of joy or attraction, love itself is so much deeper than chemicals. Love transcends time. It is immeasurable and personal. It's passed on generation to generation. It's not a habit. It's not something you can forget. And it orchestrates so much of our daily decisions. We all have a natural proclivity for love when we're born. And while science cannot find the explanation for it, Ben modeled and exemplified this love for all the people who had the privilege of knowing him. He chose love over aversion. He chose curiosity over judgment. He chose empathy over callousness, and he rejected nihilism for positivity. His legacy and contribution to all of us is how fiercely he loved others, which science simply cannot explain. I only hope I can leave this hypothesis of love without an answer as I attempt to love others, as Ben loved all of us. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jocelyn, and I had the privilege and honor of working with Ben at the Paramount since 2017. Also, I'm the biggest crybaby that I've ever met, and everyone's held it in pretty well, so sorry in advance. When I think of Ben, I think of a lot of things. I think of being loved unconditionally and wholly, never wondering if the friendship would last or not, because I knew and was always reassured that it would. Even when he became the manager or assistant manager of the box office and the boundaries were weird, I knew that nothing would change because, as he always told me, when you love someone, you show it, and nothing should stop you from doing that. Ben helped heal a lot of parts of me that I was sure were too far gone, and he reminded me that despite any flaws or imperfections, I was still someone worthy of love and effort, and that I wasn't too much. He made sure that I knew that, just like he made sure that everyone in his life knew that he loved them, from his box office pals to his students, his friends and family, and most of all, Kayla. Honestly, he would talk about her in such a beautiful way that I was about to fall in love with her. Ben radiated that perfect love that 1 Corinthians 13 talks about. You know, the one about being kind and patient that your parents bring up whenever you're fighting with your siblings. That one. It's hard to meet someone who holds those qualities and genuinely projects that kind of love unconditionally. I've only met a few outside of my family: John, Jenna, Marlinda, Meg, and Ben, of course. And I was so lucky to meet them. So lucky to meet Ben, to know him, to love him, and to be loved by him. I already have 2 amazing big brothers, but Ben was the honorary third. He was so wonderful that even my mom trusted him. And if you know my mom, you know that that's a big deal. When someone loves you, you'll know it. There's no room for doubt or worry, or if you're deserving of it or not, because love, when it's real, overpowers all of that. And Ben overpowered that. Because when you love someone, you show it. It can literally cost you nothing, because love is more than just buying gifts or saying the words, I love you. It's walking with you to the parking lot after a later Friday shift, or going to see Kinky Boots with you for the 9th time because it's your favorite show and you literally cannot stop talking about it. It's wearing his flamingo button-up shirt in December on a non-show day, and when someone asks, why are you wearing that in the middle of winter, he'd say, because I knew that it would make Joe smile. It's encouraging you to ask John and Jenna if they need a babysitter because he knew that it would lead to them becoming your best friends in the whole entire world. Or it's as simple as communicating with you when something is wrong. He never left anything unspoken, even when we had silly fights. And confrontation wasn't his thing, but talking about it was. That's love. That's the love that he showed me because he meant it. Ben loved the Paramount with everything in him. He had me beat. I talked about it a lot, but he showed it more. It was his favorite place to be. He always told me how excited he was to come back to the box office, to see his friends, to see the shows. He was even looking forward to renewal season and talking to the patrons who only wanted to renew if they could get Orchestra 1 center aisle seats between rows D through G in the first 3 weeks of the run, which is totally doable. He loved his job, and we loved him. In honor of Ben and his amazing legacy, Paramount has commissioned Ruth Poor, I saw her earlier, but I don't know where she's at exactly, to create this amazing portrait of Ben that you guys see up here. And after today, just like you mentioned, it will be taken back to the theater and hung up in the box office, his favorite place. To continue showing our love and appreciation of our Benny boy, the Paramount School of the Arts is now offering the Ben Olson Scholarship Fund. The scholarship will help facilitate arts education to kids in our community, which I know Ben would be stoked to hear about. The first year that the school opened, he taught improv for us, so I know that it'll mean a lot to him. And if you'd like to learn more about the scholarship fund and how to donate, I'll post about it later because I'm not here to ask for money, but I'll tag him so you guys can see it. As we all know, besides Kayla, theater and teaching were Ben's greatest loves. And hopefully these two things are a great reminder of Ben, his legacy, and the love that he showed us. So as I wrap up my Ben Olson fan club submission, I want to say one last thing that hopefully resonates with you guys as much as it did with me. I don't have all the medical terms for grief, but I remember reading somewhere that grief is just love with no place to go. But I think that it can be different for us learning to grieve the loss of Ben. My grief doesn't have to be a love with no place to go, because if he left me with anything, it's that love, for myself and for others. Ben loved deeply and intentionally. He knew exactly where to put it and who to pour it into, and he didn't expect anything back. So as I learned to grieve and carry that with me, I will do the same thing. I want to learn to love the way that Ben loved, joyfully and truthfully. It's the best way I know how to honor him, and hopefully each of us can take that lesson and do it too. Because as he always told me, and now as I tell all of you and everyone else that I will cross paths with in my life, when you love someone, you show it. It's not always easy, but it will always be worth it. So I will keep choosing to do that for Ben. Thank you. And I didn't cry.
Hello again. I knew Ben very well, obviously, and I know that if I didn't get myself up here to speak today, he would be pretty disappointed. So here I am. I can do this. I met Ben when I was 18 years old. My freshman year of college, my mom helped me move into my dorm. We had dinner that night with the other incoming freshmen and transfers. And then she said goodbye to me in front of this classroom, Fine Arts Building 112, where I would meet my mentor group for the rest of the semester. Ben was in that room that night, and I remember him very well. He was tall. We became friends almost instantly, and it didn't take very long before I had a crush. But Ben wasn't actually sure about me right away, so I had to be patient. I'm not very good at being patient. So I decided that I could put myself in his way and on his mind as much as humanly possible. So if I came back from a class and I noticed that I would cross paths with him, our freshman dorms, boys and girls, faced each other. If we crossed paths after that class, I would make sure to take that same path every time after that class, just in case. Or in the cafeteria, at lunch or dinner, if he hadn't come in yet, I would just say, "Can we wait a little bit longer? Can we wait a little bit longer? Just a little bit longer." Just in case he might show up. Some might have called me a stalker, but I couldn't help it. I really liked him. I think I even knew then that he was different in the best possible way. He finally came around and we dated for 2 years before he asked me to marry him. How crazy to look back at that young couple, so innocent, so naive to the world, and what adventures and hardships we would face together. Our wedding day still brings joy to my heart. I was actually quite nervous that day to be standing in front of so many people staring at me. But the way Ben looked back at me, I just knew I was going to be okay. because I had my best friend up there with me. It was a night filled with laughter and dancing and joy. And many of you in this room were here that day as well, celebrating with us. Ben was the very best in this life. If you have ever met him in any capacity, you already know what I mean. His whole goal in life was to provide a safe space for you. And if he could make you laugh, then that made him feel really amazing, as you can see. Ben was a planner, and I really loved that about him. He would plan so many adventures for us. Trips to New York to see Broadway shows like Matilda, The Waitress, and Aladdin. So many shows. Staying in the Smoky Mountains and seeing a baby bear. California, movie sets, TV props, fancy dinners, getting dressed up, and anything that looked interesting for us to try. He cared about the little things. He actually really enjoyed going to Bath & Body Works with me to pick out the scents for our home. He was always the one to keep our place nice and tidy. He was my magic coffee table. I'm doing my best, though. I'm doing my best. He always smelled good. He loved it when people complimented him about it. But life isn't always about the adventures that you take. It's about being able to be home together and enjoy each other's company. I really miss being home with Ben and hearing about his day at the Paramount. And I miss telling him about my day. He always had the great perspective, and he also just wanted to know the tea. We would watch our shows together, and it would often spark conversations about life that we didn't even know that we hadn't yet had. It's about making meals and eating them together, whether they turn out fantastic or we're just not going to make that one ever again. It's about standing behind your partner no matter what crazy ideas they want to try. And it's the little things that we take for granted. I miss him greeting me with a hug when I get home. I miss his eyes and him looking at me. I miss the way he would open the blinds in the morning and let the sun in. I miss him getting me gas in my car. I miss the little notes I would find in my lunch bag or around our place. I miss Starbucks Saturdays. I miss meal planning with him. I miss his kindness towards everybody. I miss hearing his laugh. I miss his voice. Ben always reassured me, no matter what the situation was, that everything would be okay. So naturally, without him, I'm not always so sure. But I just keep picturing him and his calmness and asking him to guide me and give me strength. And he does. He does. He taught me so much about who I want to be. And I know, clearly, I'm not the only one who can say that about him. He taught me to be grace-filled and forgiving, something I'm still working on. But he did it so effortlessly. He taught me what it really means to love without condition, and that's really hard to find today. He taught me how I deserve to be taken care of. I was very spoiled. When Ben got sick, he felt so much guilt that the tables were turned and I had to take care of him in so many of these ways. Of course I would. It's what you do. It's what any of us would do. He loved without condition, and if he ever questioned for a second that I loved him the same way, it breaks my heart. I love you, Benny, and I would do it all over again with you if I could. I want to end with saying again what I told him in almost every card I ever wrote him, and in his final days in this life, because it still is just as true today. Thank you, Benny. Thank you for being the very best husband. Thank you for being truly my best friend. You are kind and brave, and I'm so proud of you. Thank you for giving me such an amazing life. I feel so blessed that I got to be Ben's wife.
When you walk through storms, hold your head up high and don't be afraid of the dark. At the end of the road is a golden sky and the sweet silver song of our love. Walk on through the wind, walk on through the rain, though your dreams be tossed and blown. Walk on, walk on, with hope in your heart, and you'll never walk alone. You'll never walk alone.
Well, to Kayla and all of you who shared and helped us celebrate Ben's life, thank you. Thank you for letting us celebrate with you. You know, like Ben, any of us who are Christ followers really have one primary measure of what it means to see a life that is successful and full, and that is how well our lives resemble the life that Jesus lived. There's one thing that Jesus demonstrated over and over throughout his life, and that was the way that he loved and cared for people. He was consistently, he would avoid anything that would detract from his being able to be with and to love and to unconditionally care for people. Everything that Jesus did included and was for people. And like Jesus, Ben had that kind of love that was inclusive and selfless. And that's why his life is so easy, I think, for us to celebrate, is because there was so much good, so many things where we could see Jesus lived out in his life. In college, when Ben had first decided that he was going to go into student ministry, he was discouraged when there were some leaders around him who told him that probably wasn't the best path. And even when there were moments in a student ministry where he could have become a student leader in a more official capacity, Ben was not deterred. He continued to make sure that he was going to invest his life in kids and students and young people. And he did that so well. There is a chapter in the Bible, Hebrews 11, that is the sort of Hall of Fame sort of list of people of the faith. And it describes hundreds of people, actually, who live for God and people who gave their all and they never stopped living out their faith. And when the writer gets to chapter 12, he continues on with these words. After this long list of people who have lived life well, he says, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses to life in the faith, let us strip off every weight that slows us down, especially the sin that so easily trips us up. And let us run with endurance the race that God has set before us. We do this by keeping our eyes on Jesus, the champion who initiates and perfects our faith. When you read those words, you get this image of this crowd of people who are essentially cheering us on. People who are encouraging us to not give up. When you look at Ben's life, I think every single one of us is encouraged by it, inspired by it. To see the example of his giving his all and holding firmly throughout his life onto his faith in Jesus. And if you knew Ben, you knew about his faith. Even if you hadn't had a conversation about faith per se, he had lived it out so well. This may be the moment in your life when you could reflect on Ben. And if you have not yet chosen that kind of faith, that you would follow in Ben's footsteps and choose that kind of faith that he had. And if you're someone who is a person of faith, and you've chosen that path to walk with Jesus, it may very well be a moment when we're gathered here now and we think about Ben, that you recommit yourself to be all that you can be, because Ben's life inspired you. Don't let this moment pass by. Don't let this moment pass by when God may be speaking to you about your life, and let Ben influence you yet one more time. As we close today, I think it's so appropriate that we allow Ben to put a smile on our face one more time. Here's a quick video clip that I'm sure will do just that.
Hey, is this Lenny? Hey, it's Ben from Chicago. We gotta order some food. Yeah, we're down on the shore, you know? 3320 Seaview. Yeah, big brown building. Can't miss it. All right. Yeah, so we want the knots. How many knots? How many knots? Nah, man. You got 5 people. One person's gonna have 2 knots. So 6 knots. Yeah. All right, so after the knots, are you ready? You ready? Okay. 2 pies. Pie number 1, white pie. Extra ricotta. Just dollops of ricotta. Yeah, you got that. Second pie. Add sausage, half peps. I say peps, it's pepperoni, but I was trying to be, you know, peps. No, that's all, that's enough. $40, okay. I'll have somebody waiting for you. Who you bringing? Yeah, tell Danny that Ben from Chicago is expecting him in 40 minutes. We gotta eat. All right, knots in the pies. All right, thanks, Lenny, man. You hooked me up, man. I appreciate it. Out.
I sort of feel like that's worthy of an applause. Ben, we'll miss you, and we'll see you again. I'd like to ask you, if you will, just to pray with me now. God, we are grateful for Ben's life and how it has impacted so many people that he knew. And Father, how it will continue to have an influence through scholarships and through memories and through stories that all of us tell of how Ben made a difference in our life and how it changes us to make a difference in the lives of others. God, we're so grateful for a moment like this when we gather and we're encouraged and we remember. And also, Father, we grieve as we say goodbye to someone that we have loved so much. And Father, I just pray that as we look forward to that moment when we will be reunited, Father, I pray that for all of us, that you will help us to hold on firmly to our faith as well. Thank you for the peace that you offer and bring to us. Thank you for the comfort that you provide that could come in no other way. God, I pray that you will bless us and that you will keep us and that you will make your face shine upon us. And Father, as we move forward, Father, I pray that the memories and these moments will inspire us to be our best in our faith and in this life. All these things, Father, we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. That concludes our service. Thank you so much. On behalf of the family, thank you for coming today.